Gentlemen, if you want to look your best with high-quality clothing, then I recommend Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors in downtown Newcastle. Mike Caggiano is the owner, and he and his staff have been in the business for decades, and they will always give you the right recommendations. They also carry Rondinelli tuxedos. That's Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors, 210 East Washington Street, downtown Newcastle. Call 724-652-3851. Daimio and Olson Law Group, where every client matters. Serving Newcastle, Elwood City, and Youngstown. Daimio and Olson handles criminal law, bankruptcy, civil matters, workers' compensation, personal injury, medical malpractice, divorce, wills, real estate, and many more legal issues. Call any one of their offices in Newcastle, Elwood City, or Youngstown with these phone numbers. Open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Daimio and Olson Law Group, where every client matters.
It could be you, it could be me, it could be everything we see. Given the day, given the time, given the moment. It could be you, it could be me, it could be everything we see. Given the day, given the time, given the moment. Some of it comes.
Bringing to NCTV45.
Hi, welcome to the Washington Outsider and NCTV45. This is host Matthew Geiger from the Washington Outsider. Visit us at www.washingtonoutsider.org for our latest take on the news of the day. Well, today I wanted to spend a little time talking about what I call no solutions. And no solutions doesn't mean no solutions. It means whenever you're really stuck in a situation where you have to come up with a solution and the only ideas that come to mind are the ones that won't work. They're not solutions. They don't actually solve the problem. And so before we start that, let's kind of remember what's going on in the world. We just had the Paris terrorist attacks, and that's very unfortunate. Tragedy. It showed really what's been going on in the daily lives of those in the Middle East is kind of migrating to Western Europe. As we know, there's always a probability of terrorism happening, of violent crime, of any crime happening, and as a society, our public policies can do more to increase that or lessen that. In the case of Russia, their behavior surrounding the Ukraine crisis, the Russian government, has likely increased that probability for them. At the same time, the Syrian civil war and the failure to really address the Syrian refugee crisis has probably increased that probability for Europe. We see in Egypt the same issue. We see the lack of democracy, the Arab Spring revolutions, a lot of the governments, their knee-jerk reaction to people getting upset and expressing themselves publicly saying we need change wasn't to embrace change, it was to suppress dissent. Well, that's come to consequence, and that's brought up the probability of terrorism. At the same time, we can do other things that can bring in more. For instance, the United States could invade Syria, which would make us more of a target. We're already, of course, bombing the Islamic State, and that's seen as a way of helping those on the ground retake their country to bring back peace to the South. That's the kind of support role that the United States provides. But it's more than about national security, about terrorism, about military, whatever you have. It's also about, there are also no solutions to a lot of the problems. And of course, part of the reason we struggle to fight with, this terrorism is we don't have unlimited resources. And that brings us to the economy. Two major issues. Social Security, the cost keeps going up, but the number of people supporting it keeps going down. And that's really been problematic. What happened was about the 80s, we had government spending rising, taxes going up. And so the solution was to come in and kind of, deny the taxes dollars, to give tax breaks in the hopes that it would kind of, one, it would generate economic activity, then two, it would force government to cut spending, this Reaganomics approach to the economy. Well, it didn't solve the problem. It was a no solution. What it did was it ended up creating a massive budget debt and kicking the can. And we also today, we talk about like NAFTA, TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, which is currently being reviewed. There's a lot of issues, and I've talked about this online on the WashingtonOutsider.org about, why it's a bad idea, why it does things. But in essence, it creates a situation where it doesn't serve the interests of everyone. It actually makes the economic problem worse by taking money away from average Americans. It's a no solution because it doesn't actually solve the problem. Yes, it helps the economy as a whole grow, but that wealth is concentrated. It also creates larger problems. Meanwhile, we also have, just a whole host of other issues. We go through, for example, let's go back to Russia here. There's a lot of outrage with Russia, a lot of issues going on internally where you've seen a breakdown of democracy. Well, a lot of the solutions have been, let's take away from civil liberties. Going to Egypt, where we had the Russian bomb attack, the solution there was to essentially rig elections, Turkey as well. And what did that solve? It solved nothing. It's only left someone in power, solved the problem of they might lose the ability to do stuff, and created the problem of people not wanting to support the government, people being against the government. So if you go anywhere in the world, you can really see that there are such no solutions. But what is a no solutions? When we get back, and we're going to take a little time to hear from some of our local sponsors that help keep this show going in NCTV45. But when we get back, I want to talk about what exactly does no solutions mean.
Mary's Middle Eastern Restaurant. Yes, fine Middle Eastern food where elegance and charm meet old world goodness. Great lamb, chicken, and so much more. Mary's, located on Long Avenue in Newcastle. Call 724-652-2447.
Come dine with us, come dine today. If you could use some real good food, there's a place not far away. If you could use a drink or two, or a place to go and play, come to Gallows Italian Villa today.
The Crane Room is a restaurant. The Crane Room is a bar. The Crane Room is a banquet facility. The restaurant will please you time after time with their diverse menu. Ask about their daily specials. See the menu at craneroom.com. The bar gives you an abundance of choices with 35 beers on tap and always changing. Their banquet services are always to perfection. The Crane Room, located at 3009 Wilmington Road in Neshannock Township. Call 724-656-1553.
Hi, welcome back to the Washington Outsider on NCTV45. This is host Matthew Geiger from the Washington Outsider. Don't forget to visit us at www.washingtonoutsider.org for our latest take on the news of the day. Now, today we're talking about no solutions. On the Washington Outsider, we really tried to drive our conversation towards solutions. When we talk about it, it's either preparing to present a solution, it's identifying a problem. We, of course, know the first step in solving any problem is identifying the problem. Now, anyone can tell there's a problem. Fewer people can tell what that problem is. And even few people know what are the causes of that problem, what we need to solve. And then it's even smaller groups still can actually figure out there's a problem. But there are also times when there aren't solutions, when there aren't good solutions. And I call these no solutions. Now, there's two times when you can have no solutions. It's one, when people at the top, leadership, political groups, decide they have a solution that doesn't work, but it doesn't work. They decide they have an answer, they want to have an agenda, they have a plan. It's no solution when it doesn't work. You know, why doesn't it work? Well, you know, for instance, we've talked about rigging elections, for example. These problems don't work because they don't support the problem. Why? Because they don't actually address the problem. Looking at, you know, if you look at any problem solving in communities, you look at all the things we've built over our culture throughout history, they've all involved the support of communities, the support of people we're in. You know, when you end up forcing a solution that people can't accept, you know, it can solve a very quick problem. You're threatened, your control over a community is threatened, so you forge an election. That erodes away trust. Maybe people just leave the community. Maybe they just don't support you, or maybe they work against you. In the case of the world, of the broader world, it's become violence. We see terrorism. It's because people don't feel like they have an out besides violence. You know, when we sit there and do these no solutions, when we do something that people won't support, that means we're working against them. And it may solve a problem right now, but it creates another problem down the road. So a no solution really is when something that an answer to a question that creates a problem. In terms of free trade, I've argued on the Washington Outsider that free trade creates a problem by deleveraging people. You know, Social Security, for example, we often are concerned about ensuring older Americans continue to get what they've earned, whether they're, you know, the poor people, and I'm not picking on them, it's more the more affluent, wealthier ones where we have a problem, where there can afford to be some giveaway. But if we're always focused on making sure that baby boomer generation continues to get what its benefits, then we're not thinking about the problem down the line. And we've come into this problem where we've given tax breaks, where we've done all these things. So what they've done is because we've given tax breaks, we've created this massive deficit. We've created this problem. Another reason that no solutions don't work is that they just fail to actually solve the problem. We look at, you know, 9/11, we look at these French terrorist attacks again. A lot of the legislation that came out, the knee-jerk reaction that gave way to, you know, the Patriot Act and a lot of the issues we've had with national security oversight, whether it's the NSA and CIA just hacking into people's email accounts, intimidating political leaders, spying on them. In fact, we see that not only the CIA and NSA were not only spying on European leaders, but they were also spying on political leaders in America, which is the very almost undemocratic thing you could possibly think, one of them at least. And when that happens, what we've done is we've created a new set of problems, but we've also not solved any problems. The NSA, through its wiretapping, has actually, and the CIA has actually amassed so much data that it's completely worthless. They can't sift through it. And it's because those spy powers they got didn't actually solve the problem. A lot of the issue, however, when 9/11 happened, was a failure to communicate. The same issue with these French authorities, there was international information that couldn't get to it. And we see this all the time. So we had a lot of no solutions come out of 9/11, and we had a lot of these solutions that created problems, but also they just completely circumvented it. And what ended up happening was we ended up empowering people to abuse privacy, to abuse people's limits. So not only do we create more problems with no solutions, we fail to address problems, and then two, we undermine our ability we undermine our ability to actually deal with problems because people don't support us. because communities don't support us, because not only are they not supporting us, but they actively start fighting us. You can't just impose solutions onto people. They ultimately fail. When you can't just impose solutions onto problems and say, this is the answer, you create more problems. You know, you remember, you go back to Katrina and the hurricanes down in New Orleans. You know, the levees down there that broke and allowed flow water throughout, they could have been identified by engineers, but there were very few people who actually are able to identify that problem. And in the aftermath is when it really blew up there, because what happened was you had leaders in there where massive corruption was, police brutality, and when they really had a problem, it fell apart. And instead of coming together to solve the problems, to help people in need, we ended up creating chaos, fighting each other and turning each other. The same thing is happening over France. The same thing is happening on our economy. You know, there is, of course, one other reason why no solution, another reason no solution. So we know corruption, we know, you know, this insider group, this exclusion of other people, ideas and people, can create a problems. But it's also, we also end up with no solutions when we're faced with a narrowing. You know, as we make decisions, our ability to change the path we're on narrows. You know, when we make decisions that are counterproductive, we lose the ability to change this until we get to the point where we're in a crisis and there are no solutions. There's no good solutions. And all the solutions that might be available are bad. And another problem, you know, one of the biggest problems we have to these problems is that when we do corruption, you look at Russia, with its corruption in particular, they're faced with a lot of economic issues, and it's not just because of sanctions. It's because of corruption. It's because they put people out of power. The problem here is that you've excluded people, you've pushed people out who could actually solve these problems. So when you're down to this narrow issue where there's no real answers, you don't even have the people in place, the expertise, the knowledgeable, the thinkers, the engineers, the solution finders, in a position to actually come up with a solution. And that's why when you turn on the news, you hear about any number of issues, you just hear regurgitating old problems. It's because you're not letting in the people who can actually figure out the problems. Well, we need to take a break to hear from some of our local sponsors, and when we get back, we're going to open, kind of maybe reiterate some of these things in some of our conversation and clarify it, maybe what can go forward.
Tuscany Square Restaurant, 3470 Wilmington Road, where old world charm meets today's modern conveniences. You'll enjoy their spacious, comfortable seating, their fresh ingredients that go into making every dish, whether it's pizza or that just right entree. Tuscany Square Restaurant, they're here to serve you. Call 724-654-3065.
Whether it's a scheduled appointment or same-day service, DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning offers 24/7 service for commercial, industrial, and residential, as well as fire and water damage restoration. Using state-of-the-art technology, DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning experts are ready to professionally clean your carpet today. Call DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning for a free in-home estimate. Thank you for making us Lawrence and Mercer County's largest carpet cleaner.
And remember, nobody gets your carpet cleaner.
Joshua Sun Rehabilitation Center. From the moment you arrive, you know that you're in the right place. Dr. John Wrightson listens first. He pays attention to detail and then makes the determination. Joshua Sun Rehabilitation. We make the pain go away. All in a nutshell, 102 and 117 North Mercer Street in Newcastle. Visit Keith and Margot Jackson for that new look. The latest in women's and men's clothing. Treat yourself today. You'll be glad you did.
Hi, welcome back to the Washington Outsider. I'm host Matthew Geiger from the Washington Outsider. Visit us at washingtonoutsider.org. Today we're just kind of talking about no solutions. You know, when there aren't very many options, or we just don't, you know, those who have the power to implement solutions don't like a solution, we end up with no solutions. And no solutions doesn't mean you don't try to solve a problem. It doesn't mean you just sit idle and not issue. It means the solution, you're choosing to respond to a situation, a crisis, a problem, with an answer that doesn't actually solve the problem. It used to be said, you don't, you know, in an interview or whatnot, you don't answer the question you're being asked, you answer the question you want to be asked. Well, that's a very good thing. You know, if you're a lawyer or a politician, that's a great way of looking at things. But when you're really trying to be a national leader, an engineer, a scientist, a researcher, anything, it doesn't cut it. Because what you've done is basically avoid actually solving a problem. You've actually just avoided a problem. And that's what no solutions do. They avoid a problem. Sometimes it's better to wait and come up with a good problem. You know, going back to the Paris terrorist attacks, tragedies like that drive emotions, and that makes us want to respond. Maybe we go off on the, you know, Europe's done a lot to strip away its freedom, which is ironic coming from, you know, which could be arguably one of the birthplaces of freedom. You know, America put it in practice, but a lot of the philosophy behind democracy came from France. You know, and it's very ironic that the French have been very kind of picking away at their democracy out of fear. We know they've had a rough year this year, and back in the beginning there was shootings by terrorists, and now today we have the Paris attacks again. But the reaction to clamping down on national security is a no solution. It doesn't actually solve the problem. Just as, you know, bombing the Islamic State more, I mean, it's great that the French are willing to do that to help the people on the ground actually take back their countries and end the violence, but it's not going to solve the terrorism problem. You know, at the same time, joining forces with Russia, you know, asking for the Russians to, you know, come in and, you know, work with them instead of confronting them on the Ukraine crisis, that may help alleviate some of the tensions there, but you know what? It doesn't solve the problem of what Russia decides to invade Ukraine. Take part of it. It doesn't, you know, it creates a bigger problem down the road. So, and that's just as, you know, the United States supporting a lot of these dictatorships in the Middle East. Yeah, it created stability, but it ended up peace. Just as in economics, you know, tax cuts have helped maybe boost the economy for some people. Free trade has. We've messed around with Social Security, but none of this solves but this just create more problems. There are no solutions. The only way to come up with to address no solution isn't to just, you know, that doesn't mean you just have no solutions. What it means is you have to come up with actual solutions. You know, and sometimes it looks like we're not doing anything. For instance, on the Washington Outsider, I've argued since the beginning of the Arab Springs that the United States has to take a less direct role, a more support role in dealing with the Arab Spring revolutions. And to many, this looks like the Obama administration's been twiddling its fingers. It's actually mirrored a lot of things. But there are times when you don't engage problems. There are times when solutions can work. And what you need to come up with actual solutions to actually deal with are people who have the ability to do it, people who are thinking. Not just the guys you like or the guys who respond to your answers. That's part of our problem in our culture. We have cronyism. We have, you know, elitism. We have people taking power and denying others positions. You know, even in jobs, hiring managers tend to hire people who remind them of themselves, who they think will do well in a job, or who they like even. You know, which is terrible for a company. It's terrible for the future. It denies businesses, it denies our country of the decision makers, of the problem solvers we need to actually deal with problems. And so when it comes to these no solutions, the first solution is getting people who actually know. You know, a lot of times if we look in the news media, it's a struggling industry. They tend to just borrow from what they think is successful. new ideas. And you see this in, a lot of the issues with intellectual property rights, where we'll just take a problem, we'll just take an idea and not pay. That denies us the ability to actually solve problems as we go forward. So there are a lot of no solutions. There are a lot of problems, and we don't have very good options right now. But we need to start by getting people who can actually solve the problems, by empowering them, by listening to them, and bringing them in as part of the conversation. So we can overcome this no solution, problem that has really gripped the United States and the whole world. Well, just a few thoughts on, all the things going on here. We have a lot to deal with in this world, and we need to start solving problems instead of avoiding them. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you'll be back with us next week. Have a pleasant week.
Welcome to the Silk Road Fair Trade Market, home of those uncommon treasures. Wendy Farmery searches the world over to pick out just the right gift. So stop by the Silk Road Fair Trade Market. You'll be glad you did.
Butts Flowers and Gifts offers top quality flower arrangements and gifts for any occasion. The pros at Butts Flowers and Gifts provide exceptional customer service, and each bouquet is hand arranged. Stop in and check out their wide selection of gift baskets and plants. They provide flower delivery service locally to Newcastle, Bessemer, Edinburgh, New Wilmington, West Pittsburgh, and across the nation. It's Butts Flowers at 120 East Washington Street in downtown Newcastle. Call 724-652-7727 or toll free 1-800-443-7726. The Cedars is a great restaurant with outstanding Mediterranean food. The Cedars takeout menu is second to none, featuring pizza, stromboli, hoagies, their famous lamb on the rod, and so much more. So when you're hungry and you want that Newcastle taste, make it Cedars. Now with 2 locations in Newcastle, 827 Addis Street on the east side and 1101 Highland Avenue. Call Cedars East 724-658-9260 or Cedars North 724-652-7657.